Want me to either do now or at the end, or?
Pretty open, just to hear what you have to say, really.
Okay, I think what I kind of planned for us to look at is the 15 markers in particular, and then build up onto the synoptic. So my kind of aim is, but if it moves and it's fluid, that's absolutely fine. We do like the first half of the session on, oh, someone's joining, Ed. We do the first half of the session on the 15 markers, and then we do a little bit to finish with on the synoptic. So this kind of was session 3 of 3. Prior to that, I don't know if you got a chance to see did we record them, Ed?
We did, yes. I believe they are on YouTube on the DXBPE channel.
Okay, so they've got access to those.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got some more joiners now. Hi, Amy. Hi, Lee. Oh, actually, Lee, you were with me, weren't you, on one of them?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just sharing with the rest of us that we did kind of 1 hour on short answer questions and effective AO3. Then the second hour we did specifically on the 8 markers. So this now, if you haven't watched those two, I'm sorry, put do not disturb on. This now should actually flow and link with what I'd said in kind of that 8 marker session in particular. So one of the things I'd talked about specifically in the extended questions was using this approach of no, apply, say why. And that very much applies to the 15 markers, although there'll now be more for them to write in the nature of the question. Just a quick recap on that. This visual, I know it's quite a basic and simple visual, but it's one that I use students quite a lot. And it's my way of trying to share with them that if I was showing this picture post 2018 and 19, when we had the last public exams, the steps would go downwards. So the knowledge would be at the top here, then it would be application, and the smallest that they'd be writing is the AO3. So it's my way of just saying, look, that needs to flip. So for every 8 and every 15, you do need your knowledge, but it's very much at a minimum. It's a starting point, it's a starting step. You then build onto the application, and then you do either your analysis or your evaluation, both of which are say why. I know Ed spoke briefly to me about his cohort. I don't know what your cohorts are like, but just recently when I've been working with some students, maybe who are really targeted those higher grades, that's like trying to say to them, you've got to instill a discipline to really keep that knowledge to a basic amount or a summary, which for some of them is challenging because they want to write everything they know. They want to show the examiner everything they've learned. So some of them we've almost been discussing strategies of 2 or 3 sentences max as your starting point, or 2 or 3 lines in your answer space. And I think what you're going to see today is some examples that I've got of some 15 markers where you really see that element of discipline, that kind of bottom step, just starting with the knowledge. And I think often students are scared by that because they feel that they've got to put so much in there because that's what they've learned. But really, in order to access the higher marks, it's all about AO3. It's all about the say why. Just a quick recap. Hopefully you saw this on the if you watched it back on YouTube. I spoke about the book approach in terms of planning. I can't remember if it was this question in particular we looked at. I am actually now standing in front of students and saying, you have to do this, which is very unlike my character, because I think they're at an age where they should really be choosing whether it works or not. But I think more and more I'm seeing, if they've booked a question or done some element of this, it is translating into a really well-structured response. I'm really seeing that correlation between the two. So I now stand there in front of them and say, for all 6 questions in your paper, the 3 8s and the 3 15s, I think you should spend 20 to 30 seconds, because that's all it will take, booking it. So that means box your command word. That will only be analyse or evaluate. I know I spoke in the first 2 sessions about that. You underline the knowledge, that's your starting step, and then you circle the context or the sport, knowing that that's your middle step. just a bit of a quick recap on the fact that for evaluate as the command word, when you book it, it's essentially those 3 steps: box, underline, circle. And because evaluate is forming a judgment, that's quite clear what you're then doing for your say why. For analyze, you'll see on this question, you need to know what you're identifying the characteristics of. So you'll see I've almost done that 4th step. I still don't know what to call it, hence why I call it book with a 4th step. I need to get creative. If anyone can think of anything, I'm happy to steal. But you can see I've used my colour code in that now, because it's analysed, they've boxed it, they've underlined it, they've circled it. But what is my say why? What am I identifying the characteristics of? And it's the fact that you would say about what effect that would have on performance. And that's how I've just modelled that to you guys, is how I say it to students now. Always book, but remember, if it's analysed, you've got to look in the question what your say why is. What is your AO3? And might be something that you guys want to kind of deploy now with your students as you kind of head into revision time. Has anybody got, I'll just pause it for a minute. Has anyone got any questions on that?
I've got a question, Jackie, on for the sort of, you were saying be quite brief with the knowledge in the AO1. Then in the mark schemes, it mentions about, you know, depth of knowledge to access top level bands.
Yeah.
So how do we interpret that depth if they're just doing 2 or 3 lines?
Lines, yeah. Well, I think in a 5th one, in both of them, that knowledge comes like throughout, if that makes sense. So the actual statement or the description or the definition will get credited AO1, but there's no way they can really do the other bits without knowing that depth, if that makes sense. So that AO1 essentially filters throughout everything they do anyway. It's my way of saying that just that specific, I know this topic, I can describe it, I can define it, I can give you some brief detail on it, is what will get credited as AO1. We're in that level descriptor, when it says the knowledge is well detailed, that will filter throughout everything they do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And often they can get that detail and depth by providing a summary, because I think the wording is detailed, and that detail can still come through that brief summary. And I do genuinely believe that there's a time management element here, and less is definitely more. And these are students that haven't sat a public exam, so I see a little bit of their faces currently when I might say that to them, because they've probably not been in that environment where they are against the clock, they're in that pressured kind of pressured space. So it's just trying to say to them, you need to make sure you give yourself enough time for the 8 and 15s. And if you write too much knowledge, that is something that's going to affect that time management. So it'd be definitely something I would probably be encouraging you guys to do, maybe some timed questions, and, you know, really reinforcing that point of keep that knowledge as a bottom step only. The way you're going to get marks is to show that really good breadth of application, and more so that say why, that AO3. So I'm going to skip now, because we looked at these 8 markers, and I thought we could look at section C, because I was probably very guilty of ignoring that section on the previous 2 sessions I've done with you guys. You may recognise this question. I think it was on the 2021 paper. I've chosen it because this topic is on that list that came out on Monday as well. So even though it won't be the exact question, it does suggest that in the papers come the summer, this is a topic that they're going to have to kind of revisit. Is anyone willing to, sorry, my cat's decided to join us. Anyone willing to come off mute and see how they would book it? That's horrible of me to put you on the spot. Ed seems to have just volunteered Sophie, I think.
Sophie, this is Sophie's area of the spec, so go on, Sophie, try and book it.
Okay, box the command.
Yeah.
Underline topic / knowledge. So it's going to be.
Just saying, Sophie, this is really cruel of me, and then Ed.
Sorry?
Sorry. This is really cruel of me and then Ed, sorry.
Just like it. Anyway, underlying changes in society between 1780 and 1900. Your little extra bit saying about analyze. There needs to be a bit of the industrial revolution. They need to be aware of that. Also improve sport opportunities.
Awesome. You kept breaking up a little bit, so I think I've captured what you just did there. If I go on to this slide, I think you've said the same. So it's not quite as clear cut as maybe the one we've done on the 8 markers, particularly in section C, because the context is not always a sport, where I think in section A and section B, it's often quite easily to jump out what the circle is, because that's the context. But yes, analyze box, underline changes. Hopefully to learners that instantly shouts out blend. I know I spoke to in session 2 about chunk over blend. I think it's very challenging to chunk a 15-mark question. By chunk, I mean they did all their AO1, all their AO2, and all their AO3. I have seen it, and I've seen it done well, but I've also seen it done really poorly. I think they should see a plural there and think, right, I do one change, I take it through no apply, say why, and then I do another. And then I might be doing one more. 3 of those, no apply, say why, done well, I believe is more than sufficient. Circle industrial revolution, because that's the context, that's kind of the application. And because it's analysed, with the our say why is, we're identifying the characteristics of how that made sporting opportunities available to the working classes improve. Most learners will look at that and think that's knowledge. I've learned this, I know, but and then you think that's okay, that you're still going to get credited as AO3, because that in this instance is the say why. That's what you're identifying the characteristics of. So if I can just, I'm hoping this doesn't cause too many problems your end. If I just now go on to this. Can you guys see that okay? Oh. Oh, is that, I can see Ed's going to just tell. Yes, I've got some thumbs up. Right. I was really fortunate to be sent a response to this in last summer, and I asked if I could borrow it, and I've just typed it up for the purpose of presentation because the handwriting was shocking. So I didn't want you to try and have to decipher the handwriting. However, in my opinion, and I have to really kind of state that because I wasn't standardized because we didn't have an exam series, but in my opinion, I think this is a level 5 response. I've given it 13 out of 15, but I can't really explain why it shouldn't be 15 out of 15. I think I was nervous of giving it that because I wasn't standardized. I'm going to pause for a minute and just give you a little bit of reading time, because this is the first paragraph that this student wrote to that question. I never can quite judge reading time, but hopefully that's given you a little bit of chance to have a read through that first paragraph. I'd read a little bit longer, or I was with you physically, I might be asking you to maybe annotate it. So where you think that student's given a change, where they've applied it to what was going on during that time, during the Industrial Revolution, and then what was that say why? Have they talked about the impact that had on the working class? I suspect for those of you that teach section A, is that just Sophie on the call? Is anyone else that teaches section C? Oh, sorry, Sophie, it's just you. You might have been reading through it and think, yeah, well, I can see how that follows the no apply, say why. So if I just flick onto the marked one, bear with me because I've got lots of things open over here. So this is now how it was annotated. I've just, like I discussed in session 2, And I know I think we had a bit of a conversation, those of us that were on there, around the benefits of this colour-coded approach, and how it provides a really decent visual for students in terms of their know, apply, say why. So you can see straight away that structure that students used has been really beneficial. So just that little bit of, that statement of urbanisation, going back to Ed's question, he still gets in that top box because everything he's now done in the rest of that paragraph shows real depth of knowledge. Because he wouldn't have been able to do the AO2 and AO3 without knowing what urbanisation actually involved. And you can almost see in terms of a quantity that the AO3 is the most that he has written. And all that because that's say why it's all about the impact. I know this was a school that were really pushing no apply say why as well. So I think they felt really positive that it had been used by the student in this way. So we did that for urbanisation. Then he followed a similar approach for the influence of the church, one of the other changes. And you can see how little green there is, but how much blue there is. And I know, and I can share this with you because I know the school have allowed me to, although we've got, you're more than welcome to share that with your students. I think it's really reassuring for them to see how little green, but yet they've still accessed a really high mark because it's all around the AO3. I believe that he might have started to lose his way a little bit because this was the last question on paper 1. So there's an element of fatigue, whether that's physical or mental fatigue, but you can still see he's tried to continue using that structure, that blend. So he then started to talk about public schools. There was a little bit of this last paragraph maybe lost its way a little bit. He was more still on the urbanisation. We did talk about the fact that that led to development in transport and the impact that had. So I wanted to kind of share that with you today for multiple reasons. Structure being the first one, no apply say why. Still less is more, because when I know it probably appears more because I've typed it, but actually when I was reading it, he'd not written loads and loads and loads. And the amount of blue. So that AO3, that amount almost is hopefully an insight for you in terms of what we're kind of looking for in terms of quantity to get into those kind of top marks. And like I say, I can send these all to Ed after this so they can be distributed for you guys to use. I appreciate that it's for section C. I did have a feedback one that did very similar. I'll still send that, but I know now feedback's not on that list. So that might not be specifically used for your year 13s, but it might be something you want to use with your year 12s. So they're both kind of coming your way. I will pause again now. Has anyone got any questions?
Hi, Jackie.
Yes.
Can I just check? So when you use the words chunking and blending, have I understood this correctly? Chunking is when they'd do it in shorter blocks. So they'd highlight the A1, then talk about the O2, then the O3, and then they'd repeat that for the next few sections.
No, that's my version of blend.
Oh, it's the other way around. So that's blending.
Blending. Chunking is essentially where you just have 3 distinct paragraphs covering the assessment objectives. So in this instance, if this student would have chunked, he would have talked about all the different changes in one paragraph. He'd have then done almost like a second section and he would have linked all those changes to the Industrial Revolution. And then his third paragraph would have been the impact all of those had on sporting opportunities for the working class. I still know some students that deploy that, but I think with my examiner hat on, by the time they get to AO3, they're not very clear and it can become quite generic and vague. But I think on session 2, we did speak about it, that there are certain 8 markers where chunk might be appropriate because there's just one topic area. Whereas for the 15 markers, there's always going to be more than one topic, or it's always going to be plural. So I think it would probably be okay for you to say to your learners, we've got this option of chunk and blend for the 8s. For the 15s, let's work on blend. Because you're also getting to the AO3 much earlier, which I think is a positive. Sorry, Lee, did I maybe confuse you in a previous session and it was the other way around?
Yeah, I just think I missed that in the last session. I remember writing it down and then getting confused which was what, but that's really clear now. Thank you.
No, cool. There's a few times actually I'm questioning whether I really need to rename them because I think some students will say to me, but Jackie, that looks like chunk because they are chunked together. And I'm like, oh yeah, good point. So it might be something, again, I need to be a bit more creative. Are there any other questions? Cool. I can see, is it because Ed's talking to Sophie? Are you two near each other?
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine.
The work, miss.
Oh no, I wasn't suggesting you weren't. I just was like, oh.
Last time, the FAIR model, that's what, actually Ed will introduce it to me anyway. So, fact, apply, impact, repeat. And that's the option version.
You told me about that before, didn't you? So it's facts. So fact is your knowledge.
Yeah,
Apply,
To.
yeah, impact, as you say.
impact, and then repeat.
Repeat is almost like your blend approach.
So repeat is for a new knowledge point, a new AO1.
Oh, I love that. So all your students are using FAIR anyway.
We've introduced it this year. Yeah, we're going to hammer it home after half term.
We've done that as well, Ed, for the GCSE 9 markers. And I think they had there was an inset that was similar, Jackie, to what you were saying. They did like a CTC to break the question down, which was like command word, topic, context. I think
that's nice. You guys,
but I think your one's maybe a bit more clear because the 2 C's can be a bit confusing. But yeah.
Interestingly, I've had some feedback on book where they think, because it's not chronological, it's not AO1, AO2 and AO3. And I'm like, oh yeah, valid point. But then I'll just put it back to them and say, well, come up with something that you all agree on and use it. Because I think as an examiner, I still see maybe lots of underlining in the question. But it does make me think, have they actually, whatever they've underlined, has there been that thought? I mean, maybe it has, but... So is that for EdXL? The 9 markers?
Yeah. Yeah.
So context, topic, no, command, topic, context.
Context, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cool. So yeah, I showed that as a section C, but I went for that topic area because I know it's on the list. Right, what I thought I would do then is move on to the synoptic questions. This is a non-judgmental point, but just wondering how much what you're doing around synoptic questions with your A-level learners at the minute. I don't know. I don't know how many schools we've got here. I know.
We haven't started teaching yet, so we're teaching it in September.
I do remember. Okay, cool. So actually, that would probably make sense that I do maybe go from the start, just so you hear what a synoptic question actually is and what it involves. Anybody else?
I tend to just, if we're looking at a particular topic or chapter, and I can see in my head that there's a clear link with another area, I often just ask them, how can we link this to another area? And then get them to feedback and cross over. That's kind of as far as I go with synoptic questions at the moment.
Awesome. So yeah, I think that's maybe you getting them to bring in synoptic links. So bring in other, okay, I think we might have spoken about that in session 2. All right. Okay, so this is, I don't know what's going on your neck of the woods with social media, but I know after the list came out on Monday, there's a bit of a barrage of questions over here in the UK because that second bullet point on the list, well, let me just grab it. So it's given us the topic lists, but then it said topics are not explicitly given in the list may appear in multiple choice questions. So I get that. I think that's saying to you that there might be the odd multiple choice question that's from a different area. The low tariff questions. So maybe there might be the odd 1-2 marker, or via synoptic questions. So lots of people here are up in arms that are like, well, that's really unfair because we could now focus on these topics, but what if there is a synoptic topic that we're not aware of? Which I kind of support. I'm trying to do some digging. I haven't found out much yet. So the way the synoptic question works is, in fact, let me share my screen so you can see it. This one. It's not. This one. So this will be good for you in particular, Amy. So across the 2 papers, at least 2 of the 15-mark questions and at least 1 of the 8, so it's 3 in total, will be synoptic. So that means it can basically put 2 topics from anywhere together to make 1 question. There's been a real big push of this because in previous years, if I actually show you my emojis, where are my emojis? So that is an emoji that I would share with students in terms of feedback on the extended questions. Typically, when I go to synoptic questions, I ask them to spot the difference, and hopefully you can see that the emoji with the knowledge changes. So what happened in 2019 is a lot of students missed the second topic, or missed that it was a synoptic question, so then completely missed half of the knowledge that they could have got credit for. So there's been a big push on making synoptic questions explicit. So saying to learners, you've got 3, you got 1 8, you got 2 15s. I still encourage the book approach. So they would now be underlining, or whatever you guys use planning wise, but we almost want to suggest T1 and T2. So for topic 1, topic 2, when they underline. So if I gave you an example here, these are the 3 that you may have seen. I'm sure you've seen the 2019 papers. So these were our 3 synoptic questions. If we were to book them, I'll not put anyone else on the spot. That was a bit cruel, what we did with Sophie. You would box analyse. You would see barriers to female participation. So you would underline that. There's also attitudes there. So what we've got here is we've got section C, paper 1, section B, paper 2. So it also tells you that this can go cross papers. And something that I know some schools are doing in terms of helping them with that book approach is they're just encouraging their kids at this point to, like I just said to you, put T1 and T2. So they know then that in terms of knowledge, that bottom step still applies, but they've got to show knowledge of both those things. Circling would be sport. So this is quite generic. It would allow them to just choose any sport to talk about. And then because it's analysed, we still need to do that 4th step. And it's basically this bit here, how those campaigns might overcome those barriers. So that's the say why, that's the impact. So I've done kind of a double whammy there. I've revisited a book and just say for a synoptic, that's a good way of thinking, oh, this is my synoptic question. There's 2 different topics there. And also just revisited about analysing that 4th step. It's quite interesting that you can see they spread them out. So we've got 1 here in section A, section C, section B. So I feel that would be okay to think that's how it's going to be, because it would be pretty harsh to put an 8 and a 15 in the same section that's both synoptic. I don't know if any of you guys had learners who sat 2019, but this question caused all kinds of problems because it was their first 8 marker that they came to. I think a lot of them read cryotherapy and just presumed that it had been written wrongly because that's a paper 2 topic. But really, we want to stop that now. We don't want them to think like that. We want them to think, right, I've got to my first 8 marker. Oh, wow, it's cryotherapy. It must be my synoptic question. And then hopefully think, right, that's my 8 done. I've only got 2 more 15s to look out for. Hopefully then they got to the end of paper 1 and you think, right, that's my 8, my 15. I'm going into paper 2 knowing I've got 1 more 15 to go. And that's where it was in section B. So Amy, that's hopefully a quick kind of whistle stop what those synoptic questions are. And it goes back to my frustration with you, for you guys at the minute, in that we don't, from that list, I genuinely don't know whether to encourage you guys to just stick to the list or still revise other content, knowing that that might potentially crop up as a synoptic question with your year 13s. Have you all seen that? This one, yeah. I did notice, you can see it's a tiny, tiny little arrow. So at the bottom of paper 1, you've got diet and nutrition, and impact of goal setting. Now they're paper 2 topics. So my prediction, and it is only my prediction, is they are likely to be in paper 1 because they're a synoptic topic. Or the paper 2 topics are paper 2 topics, which makes me think there'll be 2 in there, there'll be 1 in here. It will be synoptic, but it'll be probably across paper 2 topics, if that makes sense. I can't even say I've heard that officially. I just feel that that's my prediction. I'm trying to do a bit more digging, but it's obviously something that's been agreed by Ofqual. So I'm guessing we're not going to hear any more about what the actual synoptic topics are. Has anyone got any questions on that? There's attitudes on there, yeah. Out of this question I've just booked with you, attitudes is in our list, but I don't think barriers to participation are. But I wanted to just share with you a little bit like what we've just done with the industrialisation question. I wanted to share with you a level 5 synoptic answer from 2019. Just got to find it. No, we've used that one. So there it was, and that's how it looked. I'm sure some of you might have seen it if you've seen 2019 paper 1. Just so you know what's coming your way, again, it's been typed, but that's how it looks non-marked. So if this is something you want to use with your students, you're more than welcome. Like I say, we only know 1 of the topics is on the current list. If I show you it marked, and this was quite challenging for the lead examiner to find, just to give you a bit of insight from 2019, this was the last question. So if students sat this chronologically, they were tired anyway. And I spoke to numerous students who came out and they were like, oh, I missed attitudes. I know it was a synoptic question, but I missed it. I think had they read this top bit, which a lot miss, they choose to ignore it, it might have signposted more that it's the synoptic question, because you've got here changing attitudes, which is a lot of what you guys teach, those of you teach section B, as well as learning about the triadic model. You then talk about obviously cognitive dissonance and persuasive communication. We finally found this one. This was given level 5. What this learner did is kind of went through a no apply. So let's get my barriers of participation and apply it. They opted to go with rugby because obviously we'd circled sport, so they could choose a particular sport. Then before they did any of the say why, they talked about the different triadic model. So they said what they obviously defined attitudes and spoke about the 3 components and linked that to sport. And then they did their AO3. They talked about how that can impact on those, how that campaign can change attitudes, sorry. So that a lot, again, feels like knowledge, but it's the AO3 because that's what was asked in the question. So we've got a bit of a merge now, a fusion, if I can use that word, of chunk and blend. So no apply, say why. And it's almost like you need to have those conversations with them, knowing that they've got to bring both knowledge together, make sure they apply both of that knowledge, and then say why. It might be that the question allows them to do no apply, say why, no apply, say why, and then bring together. But this was just an example of that kind of fusion of no apply, say why. And that was given level 5. It also again shows you less is more, didn't write loads, really quite to the point, really quite concise, less green, more blue. Which, what I then wanted to share with you is this document. Hoping you can see it. I'll send this over to you. I had done something similar as kind of a really basic Word document. Worked with a couple of schools where our focus was very much this. So we were talking about synoptic questions. And one of the schools in particular then created a much better version of it than my kind of really basic Word one. I guess I'm kind of putting it back to you guys now in terms of, would this be something that would work with your students when you're doing synoptic questions? It's meant to be a planning document, so it allows you for them to maybe just make some kind of notes of what they would put in the knowledge for topic 1, what they would put in the knowledge for topic 2, how that would apply to it, and then what their say why would be. I guess the whole purpose of it is to really make the fact that they're going to have to be ready for some synoptic questions. And when they get in that exam environment, they've got to consider how they're going to structure, knowing that the 2 topics are going to come together. I will send this over to you because I know the school are happy for me to share it. Be interesting to hear if anyone's got any immediate observations. Now it's on your screen. I think Sophie and Ed are talking. Oh. What are you two saying? I think it'd be quite nice to hear for the others to hear.
Sorry, right. So we were just I've got A-level tomorrow, so we were saying, should we go through the synoptic tomorrow?
Okay.
But yeah, so we've done very little. Me personally has done little with them in terms of synoptic questions and preparations. Like you say, they haven't sat an exam properly before. So yeah, I think this template's really good, and you can obviously put in lots of different questions at the top. Make up questions, get them to make up their own question, right? Like Lee was saying before, I think about picking 2 different areas of the spec, maybe from paper 1, maybe from paper 2, and see what we can do and just set them off individually or in pairs doing that. That could be quite a good activity.
And I completely agree. Now you're looking at the this planning sheet. Have you got any immediate observations about this? Sorry, putting you on the spot a little bit again.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know if it's quite small. I suppose you could make it A3, couldn't you? I think it's a good starting point. The only thing is it gets them to develop an understanding of it, but then in terms of translating into an exam paper when they just get given one small box to do some planning in, it doesn't translate well into that. So that'd be the most difficult bit. It's fine, this scaffolds for them, but then how able are they to do that on their own with none of the structure?
100%, and we now know that time is difficult to even complete that planning box anyway, even though it's there. That's kind of why I asked, because I do get a real mixed bag of observations, particularly from students. So some are like, oh, I really like that. I think to maybe use as a classroom tool, just to start getting them to think about, right, how am I really now going to merge these 2 things? Then I'll hear some that say, I don't like it, it's too small, it feels too busy. And I think that's okay, isn't it? But I thought I'd present it to you guys, because then that's also a conversation you can have with your students, or as a department, you can start to think, right, we need to make this explicit, particularly now we're getting towards the end of the course. How are we going to approach it so they're well prepared for that synoptic question and they're not going to panic? Like we know we had a lot of learners panic in 2019 with the cryotherapy, for sure, and with the attitudes one at the end because they missed it. So this will be coming through to you guys as well. Use it, get rid of it if you don't want it, adapt it, like that. That's
Yeah.
key for me to share it.
I'll do that tomorrow. Oh, I'm still on mute. I'll do that tomorrow, everyone. That's what I'm doing. It's my lesson plan.
Ed made a really valid point as well, in that, because we know we've only got a few out there. My understanding is Exam Pro are going to have 2 model papers that are linked to this advanced information. Are any of you on Exam Pro? Have you seen them? Are they out? Ed's nodding.
Yeah, they've emailed saying that they're on their way, but they're not there yet.
I'm guessing there'll be synoptic questions on there. There needs to be to align with what the papers are going to look like. So that gives you more to kind of practice leading towards the exam. But if you have either a department that's willing, or you want to do it as a teaching and learning activity with students, this is something I kind of encourage, that almost you use as a bit of a checklist. So if you're going to plan it, your first thing is, well, what are the two topics we're going to pull together? If I just pause there, actually, interestingly, this has also come from doing some department training in schools where they are starting to look at their scheme of work and considering synoptic checkpoints. Now, I know that's not something perhaps you want to do with your year 13s, but maybe if you want to review your scheme of work, I know that's quite common now over here, where so-and-so might be teaching this, so-and-so is teaching this. They see it as a good topic where it can come together as one, and they see that as an option, whether it's termly or half-termly, to do a synoptic checkpoint. So when they do something, whether it's a paragraph, an 8-marker, a 15-marker, just to raise the profile of what this synoptic question involves. I know some departments that are finding that really challenging because of the nature of who's teaching what at what time, but it's also something that they are considering bringing in to help the students not get to this point in year 13 and think, oh gosh, right, now I need to know about synoptic questions. So yeah, the checklist is almost getting you to think of those two topics, then choose a scenario. You know, that a little bit like what we saw with the This Girl Can one. Often include the sport or a context, so we know we've got that AO2. Pick your AO3, pick your analyse or evaluate, maybe even use them both at different times. So same thing, but one could be an evaluate, one could be analyse, so they appreciate how the AO3 is different. And then you get that final question. So when this comes through to you, so you know what they are, it's a long time ago now, but you can see there, that's not right, that wasn't 2020. It might have been actually, because that was pre-lockdown. So I was fortunate enough to work with a group of teachers where we actually set some time aside to use that checklist and come up with various synoptic questions. Some of them you might find when you do it with your learners, they don't work, but on the rest of this PowerPoint, they are the kind of questions that these teachers came up with, all following that checklist. So you can see how it had some kind of scenario. They picked the sport, they decided on the analyse or evaluate, and I think in most cases that we've colour-coded them. Yeah, so you can see that we've got a few on here that can really kind of bring two topics together. So just so you know what's coming through to you. I think that might, I thought that, yeah, there's a few more at the bottom as well. But I know from that time, a lot of the teachers found that a really beneficial thing to do, because it made them think, okay, this is something that, it didn't take them long, but it made them think, actually, that's something we can go back and do as a department if we need to. So when we're doing those synoptic checkpoints or we're doing assessments, we might want to, certainly as year 12 develops, consider maybe doing a synoptic 8-marker, just so they're not going to be in a position of, gosh, I now need to prepare for this running up to the exam. So you guys got any questions on the site? I know I did that quite quickly, but hopefully it was sufficient enough just to, certainly for those of you that are new to it, to know what the synoptic questions involve. Oh, I'm going to take that as a no. Awesome. There are no questions, Ed.
I do enjoy a good question, but I haven't got any right now.
I know I stuck within section C then, but because I know this session was going to happen as a 3 of 3. I know prior to this, if you looked on the one on YouTube, I was a bit more using section A and section B. That's the reason for doing the section C now. Amy, sorry to put you on the spot, was that okay for the synoptic questions?
Yeah, super helpful. Yeah, and a really good overview. It's quite interesting to see like the comparison, I guess, of what we're doing in GCSE and how that builds in A level. And yeah, tips to try and like curriculum map it and stuff like that. So yeah, super useful. Thank you.
I think I've worked with quite a few schools like yourself that are now just starting A level, and they're like, we're so glad we're hearing this now. Whereas sadly, some of the centres that started in 2016, it became almost a bit reflective, and then having to think, okay, this is something we perhaps should have known, but we didn't know. So you're quite nice that you're starting and empowered that you know this is the case, and can, like you say, can map accordingly and make it explicit quite early on. Has Lee gone? Yeah.
She's gone to a netball fixture, sorry.
I know. I couldn't take my eyes off your whatever's behind you guys.
Our dancer.
Yeah. Is that like a display?
I thought you had.
Yeah, it goes all the way
more
along.
People in the meeting.
There's all different dances all the way along.
I love it.
I thought there was 4 people there the whole time.
Just punching
Holding a
me
really
in
good
the head.
pose.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was kind of what I know I did it quite pacey, but that was really quite what I was keen to share with you on the 15 markers, but then on the synoptic questions. And hopefully that's going to be useful, certainly with your year 13s now up to the exam, but maybe considering ready for year 12s as well.